Hello, welcome to my channel. This is the beginning of a series that I'm going to do here about bike setup. Those two kind of go hand in hand. And how I do it and what I've learned, because over the many years that I've been riding, I've learned so much, and there's been times in my life when I just had no idea what I was doing, or I had strong opinions about things that I've since debunked, things like that. So in this first video, I'm going to talk about tires, because I feel like that is probably the single most important thing that you need to be thinking about every time you grab your bike out of the garage or basement or wherever you store it, and you're going to put it on the rack and go hit the trail. The first thing I'm going to stress here is don't just grab your bike and go. Always, and I say always, check your pressure. Have a pump available, have a gauge, and make sure you check your pressure, because that is the single most important thing that's going to affect how your bike rides out on the trail. Okay, so I have both of my bikes here. This is my full suspension Salsa Rustler, and this bike has the really popular Minion DHR2 on the rear and DHF on the front. So this is actually, well, let's get to the right. This is actually like one of the most common setups you'll see on full suspension bikes, especially trail and enduro bikes. One of the things I just learned, I always thought R stood for rear and F stood for front, but somebody told me R stands for race and F stands for free ride. So I guess that doesn't mean this is the rear tire and that's the front tire. But when you look at the tread pattern, it almost seems like that's what it is. So I don't know, kind of confusing. If anybody knows more about that, let me know. But anyway, these are the stock tires. Actually, this is a new tire that's the same as the original tire on here. You can always tell because it's got the yellow instead of the white. So that's what this bike came with. And then this bike has the Recons, again Maxxis still. I actually changed the tires on this bike. I want a little bit faster rolling tires. So I'll talk a tiny bit about that and the differences. But the bigger thing I want to talk about is tire pressure. Like, that is such a huge factor in how your bike's going to ride. I actually run tubeless. I swear by it. But whether you run tubeless or not, I mean, the tire pressure thing is still a thing, right? The nice thing about tubeless is you can generally get away with a little bit lower tire pressure and everything will be fine. You start doing that with tubes, you risk pinch flats, you risk other issues, things like that. So I run, well, it's funny because if I go back many years in the 90s, I used to run my tires really firm. I always thought they needed to be like 50 psi, 60 psi. Kind of came from the BMX mentality. I run my BMX tires at like 60 psi because I'm usually riding, really hard packed dirt, or I'm riding street or skate parks, things like that, and I want to be able to pump and have all that taken care of. And then I applied that mentality to my mountain bikes, which was not really smart. But now I've learned that tire pressure is a major thing, and I run my rear tire at about anywhere from 21 to 24, depending on the trail that I'm going to be riding. And then I run my front somewhere between like 19 and 21, something like that. If you look at how a body is positioned, and given that you have everything else set up correctly on your bike and you're not running some old school thing with a short frame and a super long stem and all of that, which I will talk about in another video, your body weight is, when you're seated, you're going to have most of your weight on the rear tire, and when you're standing, you're going to be more centered, but you'll be putting more pressure on the rear than you will on the front. And you actually want the front, and believe it or not, the suspension fork actually matters too, to have more traction And so kind of having a few less PSI on the front than the rear gives you just a tiny bit more traction on the front. So your bike is just a bit more controlled in the corners. It kind of gets pretty complex, but find out what tire pressure works for you. I will post a link in the description to chart based on your weight and volume and wheel size and all of that, how much pressure you should start with, and then from there make minor adjustments. So I run pretty much the same on my full suspension bike as I do my hardtail. If I do go ride like a gravel or a more hard pack thing, and I know I'm not doing single track or whatever, I will probably bump these up to like 28. I generally don't ever go up to 30, but like 28, and then I'll generally run the front pretty close because I'm going for faster rolling. But one of the things that I've learned about rolling resistance, and this is actually coming from the road bike community, believe it or not, is it used to be this mentality of running 120, 140 PSI. The more PSI, the better rolling. And they're learning that that isn't necessarily the case. Being down from that a little bit and allowing the tire to actually have some flexibility and movement to go over the little subtleties in the road. Even if it's a smooth road, it's not smooth. It may appear smooth to the human eye, but it is not smooth to the tire, especially those skinny road tires. Well, we apply that same kind of thinking to mountain biking in gravel, and you start to realize it's a pretty rough surface that you're riding on. So you want the tire to have kind of a certain amount of, pliability, flexibility, or whatever to kind of work around all those irregularities, because if it's doing that, it's going to give you a smoother, more consistent ride. If you pump your tire up to super high pressure and it's just basically jittering and bouncing over everything, that's just gonna, not only is it gonna really make your traction suck, it's gonna actually make you slower. And what they said in this recent video I watched is people think it's faster because it feels faster, because you're like feeling the trail and it's like, oh, this is really fast. Yeah, you get all the sensations of it feeling faster, but it's actually not faster. And they've done tests at different tire pressures and know for a fact that having super rock hard tires does not make you any faster. So you got to find that pressure that works for the terrain you're going to be riding. And then tire tread matters. Having closer together smaller treads like this and lower profile and all of that is going to give you more rolling, so it's going to be a little bit faster than a really aggressive tire like this. With more space in between is going to cause more vibration, slow you down a bit more, and but it will give you better like loose surface traction. So that's kind of the big difference. And since I ride mostly hard pack, I do like these, and I don't know what I'll go to next on this bike. I do sometimes take this bike places where a tire like this does come in handy, and I generally, because I'm not always going for maximum speed on this bike and I'm mostly just going for fun and just enjoying my ride, I might not care to change out the tires on this bike. But this bike, I'm trying to do some events with it and get maximum speed out of it, which is why I upgraded to carbon rims and things like that. So I'm going to try to optimize what tire I want on it too. So that's a little bit about tires. It is probably the most important part of your bike as far as like how your ride is going to go. And the first thing isn't necessarily changing the tire you have on your bike, but making sure you're running the correct air pressure. That's the first thing. Then once you've got that figured out and you're checking it every single time before you go out for a ride, then you'll start to like maybe decide, oh, I want a different tire for this reason or a different tire for that reason. But generally the stock tires that come on bikes, they're pretty good. They're decent. They're not probably the most optimal for whatever you're riding, but they're pretty good. And I've always had pretty good luck with the stock tires that come on my mountain bikes. So don't get too hooked on this idea of what tread you want, unless you're really looking to be competitive and racing or anything. But definitely get really focused on what air pressure you need to be riding and get in the habit of checking it before every ride. Okay, next videos we'll start talking about saddle, handlebars, handlebar width, how your cockpit should be set up. We'll even get into crank arm length and other aspects of bike setup and bike fit. Fit meaning seat height. You know, we're going to talk about saddle width at some point. All of this stuff I'm going to talk about over the next few weeks here. So please subscribe if you're interested in these topics. It really helps me out, helps you out. My videos will pop up in your feed if you subscribe. If you don't subscribe, then it's random. You'll never know if my videos pop up in your feed. And then like this video to let me know that you want more content like this. That's the whole reason why those things exist on YouTube, is it's a way to tell us, or making these videos, what you think. So if you just watch videos, and this goes for any video, and you really like a video and you're not subscribing and you're not liking and stuff, then you're not doing yourself a favor, you're not doing them a favor or whatever. So that's my plug for liking and subscribing. It's actually an important tool on YouTube. Thank you for watching. Peace.